So in this video, we're going to go over a little bit the grid layout that exists in Cascading Style Sheet. And this is not the Bootstrap grid or some other framework's grid. This would be the standard grid that the W3 consortium has designed. It's supported by a lot of browsers already, even though it's still, I guess, in a draft mode. It's been in draft mode forever, but it hasn't stopped people from using it. So we're just going to go over some basics. There's a lot of things in Cascading Style Sheets. There's no way we can cover it all. We'll go over a little bit so that we can actually get a grid up and some different techniques of attacking it in that. Fractional units, using names, using pixel values. I'm starting with a blank sheet in that, so there's no style. And so we have Chrome running here, and it's this blank one in Vite. So nothing's happening yet. So I wanted like a couple of things is to go over some basics, but also, hey, how would you actually, could I use the browser to help me design it? It's the thing that's going to render your layout eventually, and it's not a bad idea to also use it as a design tool because there's a lot of stuff already built into it in that. So one thing we should do is probably, since we're here, Control-Shift-I to bring up the inspector. Okay, and so right now we have, make this a little bit bigger. Actually, yeah, shrink that off. If we go and pick this up, it's already got our index.html page loaded, so we see our main hyphen view, our main map, our KPI, and our chart. So that represents the same file we have back here in VS Code. In that, I'll just hop over here. So we just have this concept. We have this main app, and it's got this area for a map, area for a key performance indicator, and an area for a chart in that. So how can we chop up the page to say, hey, you get this part of the page, you get these other parts. So we're going to design some type of grid system to drop the, let's say, components in, even though these aren't full-fledged components. They're just divs. So we need to get started, and so we'll start with pixels but then we're going to quickly move off pixels in that and take a look at fractional units and probably end up on names, because names is more like a GIS way of doing stuff. It makes more sense, I think, in that. So you have to, I guess, make a decision. In here, we can hunt by ID or hunt by class name. I think the standard of what you see is typically styles, although we can do it by ID. That's usually more of a search deal, like, get element by ID or something like that. But Cascading Style Sheets usually go after class names, and so we'll stick with that. And it wouldn't hurt to actually we'll just grab this right here, right? And that we'll go over. And so we need to, the question is, are we going to go do dot, or are we going to do the hashtag and that? And so if you're doing class names, it's dot, and then we'll come in and we'll say that this has a display of grid. Okay, and that gets us started on the grid layout in that. Now, can I see anything in Chrome yet? Probably, I'm going to say not too much. Or what it is, it's way up here in the corner. It has no size yet, right? And so what we can't see, because it's just all this stuff on top of each other, and that is, I'm going to make this, I don't quite need to see this yet, is that we see a 1 on top of a -1 because we don't really have any grid areas yet, and we have like a -1 over here. So they have this thing called positive indexing and negative indexing, much like you would do with a slice in Python or in JavaScript in that. Also notice that if we come over here, right, we can see that it's detected that, hey, this element has a grid layout in that. You can turn the grids off and on. And so like if you come in and you see that, click it so that it's like highlighted, and then it turns on these grid lines. We don't see too many grid lines yet because we haven't just like made up any rows and columns that go into this grid. In that, they're under, I believe, a layout. If I can find it, we can turn a bunch of things on. Show track sizes, and that shows you how many pixels you're dealing with. Show area names. We don't have any names yet, but we will. And extend the grid. So say your component's only using this part of the page, it'll extend the grid. We'll come and turn on and off some of these as we start getting stuff actually made, so that we can start to see some and see what effect of turning these things on and that. Do we want to show line numbers? What do we want to do? Show line numbers, show labels. That's okay. In that, we'll get to that later. In that, and so I might actually turn off track sizes right now. In that, but it's going to start to look better once we actually get something in. Displayed in here. The big thing is we want to we're gonna start it with some pixels, and then we'll go take a look at existing style sheets and break them down. So we need to set the, and I do believe after watching enough of these videos and the way things are ordered implicitly, that start with the concept of rows first in that. And because you'll find when you put numbers in place, like in grid gap and stuff, the first number is assumed to be the row. So just get in the habit of, hey, deal with the rows. In this concept, I want to have 2 rows, we'll say. And for now, we'll just hard code them at 200 pixels each and that. All right, so all you do, this would be 1 row, this would be the second row and that, and they're 200 pixels in height and that. And so let's go back and can we see anything in Chrome yet? We can. Okay, just so you know in that. And so we see these grid lines. Now, here's a big thing about grid lines. The count starts at 1 in that. And the div, the thing that you want to put in this conceptual grid layout, right? So the count starts at 1, but 1 is like the origin position. And so the first row goes between grid line 1 and 2. And the second row is between grid line 2 and 3. And I think there's a 3. See, they're already colliding and stuff. I actually feels like there's a 4, but we're not going to get into that and that sort of thing. And that. So we'll see. You could definitely get some collision happening over here. But that's what those grid lines mean. You go from line to line. So like it's not row 1, row 2. It's more like you're designating an area. So what we see as the first row, row 1, is between grid lines 1 and 2, and the next row 2, and that. Or you might want to say, well, row 1 starts at grid line 1, and row 2 starts at grid line 2, but then goes to the next grid line, and that. So anytime the number of grid lines you'll have will be the number of rows plus 1 or the number of columns plus 1 in that. So we're just going to jump back and add some more stuff in that. So pixels is not a bad way to start, like I said. And so we'll go grid, nope, grid column and template columns and that. And so we'll have 2 columns of 400 pixels, right? Using different numbers so we know who is who and whether we have the concepts in our head about rows and columns correct. Yeah. So when we go back into Chrome here, let's go back. Did I not? I did something bad in that. I put a comma in. It got confused in that. So it's a space, not comma. Habit in that. So we'll go back in. And we can see that there's a grid line showing up now. I need to make this a little bit bigger. There, now I can kind of see that. Okay, so there is a grid line going down vertically, we'll say, called 1. And this is grid line 2 going down vertically, and 3. So if you have two columns, you're going to have 3 grid lines. If you have 2 rows, you're going to have 3 grid lines. So you can, n plus 1 is what you can think of when you're doing that. Now, one thing, if we turn this off, we still can't see anything, right? We can't see anything. Control Shift I to get that back. So it wouldn't hurt to actually, shade in our div. So I think I might put a background color on our main. So we'll just pop back in here, just so that we could see it when we're in the browser as well. So sometimes this might be confusing. It depends. It helped me out to actually have a color there in that, so I could see what was actually part of my grid layout and what wasn't. I'll just take bisque, beige. We'll go with beige right now in that. So let's go pop back out and take a look. Okay, and so what I want you to see here is that our grid kind of stops to about here, just so you know. And this area outside isn't really part of it. And if we close this window, right, we'll see our grid kind of showing up, which I'm cool with right now. So get back into the inspector so that we can see the grid lines in that. So I have two columns. The concept eventually is that I want to have the map take up this big chunk. I want to have the chart up here and the KPI down here. Okay, that will restrict those components that I drop in. So I need to add a little bit more cascading style sheets stuff for that to happen. I need to then start setting sizes on that. One thing also is I'll put a gap in so that to just really emphasize, just for now, because we can take this out later. So it's called a grid gap, not gap. I've been making that mistake a lot. In that. So we'll go grid gap, and just so you know, when you go the 8 pixels, and I'll go 4 pixels so that they're a different size, so that you understand that one of these numbers is for the row, and one of these numbers is for a column. And I'll just go back into Pro, and now we see, right? So the first number is the gap between rows, and the second number is the gap between columns. And this is why I want you to get in the habit of start with the rows first, because a lot of these other values that you can use assume that the first number coming in is row. So if you just keep all this consistent, do rows first. A lot of these other settings that you put in are row first, column second, and that. Just to keep things consistent and straight in our head. So that's enough to get to, so that when we're in Chrome, we can tell what part of the grid that we are in that. So we will go dot, I guess, map hyphen view is gonna, and this is where we gotta set, well, what, right? So what I'm gonna set is, well, how many rows does it consume in that? Or not, would that be the right way to say it? Really what I'm saying is it's going to go from these different grid lines, right? Even though I'm going to go grid hyphen row in that. And so the convention is, say I want to go from grid line 1, which is the very first grid line for the row. So that would be the very top of the screen or top of the window, top of the browser of the document loaded. Say to grid line 2, right? But their notation is this. They put a little /. So what that means is that the map is going from right now, I don't know if I like this one. It starts at grid row 1 and grid row 2. I might change that actually. I think I'm going to change that because I want it to span in that. So go from, well, let's take a look. We'll get this done and then we'll change it and then we'll see what the effect is in that, in a grid hyphen column. Oops. And it's going to go from 1 to 2 in that. So 1. This is, it's like we're saying 1 from grid line 1 to grid line 2, but their notation is this /. Right? That means, oh, I said 1 to 1. Let's change that, 1 to 2. That should, okay, so we have that there. This style is going to match this guy here. Okay, so let's go back to Chrome and see what that means in that. So if I expand this, let's expand this a little bit, and I click on the map, right? I click on the map, it says, hey, you're going to be up here. I'm not going to go, well, you know what? That's really not what I want. I want the map to go all the way from here to here. So it means start at grid line 1 and go to grid line 3 in that. So I want the map to go from here to here. So let's just go quickly change that. And so that'll be back on the style sheet. And I'll make it, hey, in terms of rows, you go from grid line 1 to grid line 3 and that. So all 32, that would be pretty big. Let's get that to 3. And let's go back to Chrome. Let's do that again and go up on the screen. Now when I click on, just so you know, when I click on the KPI and the chart, they're being put in these KPIs up here, but I don't want it up there. That's not a big deal. Chart's automatically going in there. And when I click on map, oh, see, map now takes up hey, the map is going to column span. So this would be, I guess, one of the key distinctions between something called flex, where it's rows that just drop down and get and the fact that we can actually span the concept of rows in this. So my map is going from the beginning of row 1 to all the way to the end of row 2, which is designated grid lines 1 to 3, right? So start at grid line 1 and go all the way to grid line 3, and that's the part I want the map to take up. So what I'm going to do now is we'll go back in and copy this, because okay, let's go back and we'll check on this. Right now my KPI is up top and my chart is below. And I'm like, well, I don't want it that way. Now I could actually go move the order in the HTML, or I can use the styles and say, hey, no, put the chart from row grid line 1 to row grid line 2. So and so without moving the HTML, I can just change the style and have things move around. So that's something to get used to. So we'll take this quickly. Copy paste is always dangerous in that. And we'll make this a chart. And we'll make this, oh, I got these backwards, Control Z in that. This would be the chart. And this would be KPI. And so I want the chart to go not from 1 to 2. So from grid line 1 to grid line 2, row wise. And I'm actually in column 2, 1 over. So I say column 2, but it's really grid line, right? That's another thing too, is to understand the grid line concept. From grid line 2 to grid line 3. And then we will say I want the KPI view. I think the row is definitely going to be different. So it's going to be from grid line 2 to grid line 3. Yeah, that'll work. And column should be the same as my chart. So from grid line 2 to grid line 3. Okay. Let's go into Chrome and see. And so when I click on map, it's there. When I click on KPI, notice that even though KPI is the next thing in the file, I was able to say, no, go from, well, first, well, no, I did row, so it goes from row grid line 2 to row grid line 3. So let's go back and take a look at that. Row grid line 2 to row grid line 3 for KPI, and also 2, 3 for column. So we'll go take a look. And so column, right, this line, 2 to 3, and that. And when I click on chart, it's up high, right? So this is where you might be used to the order of the elements in the HTML file dictating where things go. And this is where cascading style sheet says, no, we're putting KPI up higher, because we just go from, basically we go from grid line to grid line. And then it's also understanding that although we're saying rows and columns, it's really these column grid lines and row grid lines that we are drawing the boxes from. Now the thing is, like, this is fixed in that, and so that's not bad. That gets kind of stuff in the right spot, but we're hard coding the sizes and that. So there's some tricks you can do in terms of, I guess, like just more abstractly saying, well, I want 1/3 of the interface in that. And these are these fractional units. So what we'll do here is we are going to change, actually it will be changed in my main.js to not import styles anymore, but we'll go to these fractional unit version and that will bring up that style sheet and that. And so what this, there's a couple things going on here, just so you know, and I'll comment them out so you can see the issue. Firefox let me know there was an overflow. I don't know if Chrome will allow me to do that and that. What I found is if by not giving a height, I needed to give the rows a height in that, or there's got to be a way to set the height on for the grid. Now, what this comes from, it seems to be okay for columns, but it's the row height that really gives you the problem. Because on a web page, it's normal to I guess scroll. So the height of the page, could we say it's limitless, and that kind of concept. And so trying to do a height is tough in an abstract concept if you don't have something to go off of in that. So again, this one is to help with row height. In that, I might comment it out for now. Oh, not a good idea. It'll comment that out. The thing is, it's not going to know. We still have a grid gap of 4/8, so we can see the lines. We have this background color in that. But what this means is these are called fractional units. That's what the FR is. And so if you go one fractional unit to another fractional unit, it's almost like a weight. And so what we're saying is that these rows, height-wise, are evenly weighted. And what we're saying on here, actually, is that these columns, although we have two columns, the first column, from grid line 1 to grid line 2, is going to have like twice the amount of weight as the other. So technically, this is like a 50% split, and this is like a 66 to a 33% split. Right? The thing about fractional units, if you watch enough videos, is that they basically subtract out the gaps and margins and padding for you, and then they decide how big it is. And so if you do your own calc expressions, like you see I have commented on line 2, you also need to calculate, well, how big is the gap and all these kind of things. The fractional units, it's built in to take care of, hey, there's a gap between this. We got to subtract those amount of pixels off first, and then divide that evenly, and then that's how we figure out the size. And so let's go jump into Chrome if we can, and it's here and that. And so what you probably notice now is that this is much wider, right? So it used to be down the middle of the page, but that's because it's two fractional units at this point. And so if I grab this here, this is the grid line in that, and this is the map view, and it's not quite working the way we thought in that. So we'll get in, and that's because of the height, right? Because I had commented that out. We're all squeezed up because it doesn't know how big. It doesn't know how big to make the rows. It's totally confused in the cascading style sheet. So what you can do here is, we'll comment this line out. This says what's 100% the vertical height of the browser, right? Now this here, we'll take out this minus 8 pixel magic is on Stack Overflow somewhere. We'll put it back in. I don't know if Chrome will report an overflow situation in that. But let's go back in here. Now our map, look, see, now our maps are looking, now they actually have some height in that. It has no problems figuring out how wide to make the columns, because the browser is only as wide as your screen, but because you can scroll, then the height thing gets confusing about, because, well, we can scroll forever, and then so it just taps out and just doesn't try to calculate the height at all. So when we go into the map now, we can see that it's like 2 rows high, but from grid line 1 to grid line 3, and it's about 66% of the screen, and that as well. Now, is it saying anything about an overflow situation here? Oh, it's not. So what I'm going to do is I had this in Firefox as well, in that, and I'll bring it up. No, this is it could be Firefox, yes. And that. Can I do a little refresh on this? In that. There was a thing where I got this message that I was overflowing. In that, I would say right now it looks okay. In that, but you'll see this trick of what it is that you go slightly beyond the page, or the scrolling gets kicked in. Now there could be some layout stuff about warnings and that. Who knows? There's so many settings in here and that. Oh, that's because I'm looking at Chrome. Bad me. here's Firefox in that. But in that, I'm going to leave that in there, or maybe I cut it out. But here's the overflow message. That what it's saying is that this right now is a little bit bigger than the screen, which would kick in scroll bars maybe if you've turned them on, and that sort of thing. That you got to look. I got to scroll to the page a little bit, right? So Firefox is telling me, yeah, what you designed here is a little bit bigger than what the browser can show. And you're going to be missing a little bit on the bottom. And so I will pop in and I will add that minus 8 pixels. Why 8 pixels? It's that Tailwind 4-pixel grid, I swear, that people seem to pick up on. So let's make sure I'm really in Firefox this time. And now the overflow symbol, right, which means, hey, vertically this thing was too big, and that isn't causing a problem. In that, I think in Stack Overflow, I saw someone do 10, and then I'm like, yeah, it's probably 8. In that, the magical, mystical 4-pixel grid system, and that. And so when you click, this is the whole thing. When you click on the map, it's the big chunks. You click on the KPI, it's down in the bottom corner to the left, and the chart is chart's not happy. Well, let's go figure out chart. Bad chart. I probably need to go in and mess around with the code and fix that up in that. So right now, or we're not getting a hit, 2, 3. Oh, that's because it's matching. I want chart to be a little bit higher. All right, on. Let's get this fixed. So the chart view would need to be, in this case, from row is okay. Is it row? No, it's too low. I need it from grid line 1 to grid line 2. So let's go back into Firefox and change and take a look. So this would be, if I click on, there's KPI, and now my chart is in the right spot, right? And so from grid line 1 to grid line 2, and then grid line 3, I can't quite see because right on the edge and that sort of thing. And that, but I'm not in an overflow situation according to the inspector, or so it says in that. And so this can actually help you, like I said, preview what your grid's going to look like, right? So map view takes up conceptually 2 rows, 66% of the screen, with chart with a chart high, KPI low, in the lower part of the screen, even though they're not in that order in the file, right? So this ability to pick up a chunk of an element anywhere in the DOM and then place it wherever you want on the screen. Something to get used to, because I'm used to, like, getting the order right in the file, and this is telling me, no, I can move things around and position them differently in that. And so one thing is that when you're designing these, definitely take advantage of the developer tools, which is what this is in Firefox and in Chrome. It depends what tool you like. Like I said, it was nice to see that little overflow message on the grid, because then I knew there'd be a little bit of my app cut off, and I may not know why in that, or I might see scroll bars kicking in when I wasn't expecting them to in that. So I find that the FR is not a bad way to look at things, just so you know in that. And so, again, there's a lot of stuff built into this fractional unit, and that you can think of as weights, like evenly weighted would be, like a 50-50 breakdown. I get 2 times whatever amount you have, right? So you're looking at a 66 versus 33 split in that. Another one where you can do is names in that. And so we will do this one here, and this time I'll go to Chrome. Maybe we'll go to Chrome, and that's something. Show line numbers, show line names. No. Oh, you can name the lines in that, and you can kind of see chart here, KPI, and that you get a big label collision there. I'm gonna pop over to Firefox, and it does it. It puts them in these areas, which I'm like, okay, that's a lot easier to visualize in that. And so, this is where you might, hey, I'm going to just install Firefox so that I can visualize my grid in that. And again, this is like the 50-50 breakdown, and we'll take a look at it. Between the map gets 50% of the screen in terms of width, but it gets 2 rows, 100% vertically and that I'm not overflowing, which is good. So I'm happy with that. And I click on the map. It's going to consume all that space. I click on KPI down in the corner, chart down the corner. I do like this these names showing up in the middle. So I will give some flowers to Firefox that in terms of visualizing this grid system and where things are going to be a little bit nicer, a little bit nicer. Put a little pressure on the Chrome development team in that. This is okay. There might, there could be some option to put the labels in the center. Who knows inside here where that setting might be. But let's go back to the file, all right? And we will, let's first maybe take a look at names and that. And so you still have to set the height. You still got the magic, hey, 8 pixels because of these mystery pixels and that. So 100% of vertical height minus 8 pixels. That's the height. Our row height is what we're setting here. Oh, no, we're setting, okay. We're setting the height of the container, and then when we go functional units, we know how much to assign to the row height and that. And so we make a little grid layout with these grid template areas. And so we put little names in there. Ooh, Control Z that, where this would be like, this is the first row. And there's a map area and a chart and a map area and a chart. Now, because it's done like this, right, in that, because there's only 2 elements in here, map, chart, they're basically going to get a 1FR each, right? They're going to get 50% of the screen, just so you know. So they're going to get the 1FR and that. And then we just, in the map view, we say, hey, you go into the area called map, KPI, you go into the area called KPI, and chart, you go into the area called chart. So we kind of see, hey, map goes here to here, chart goes here, KPI goes here. This is almost like seeing those names on the grid to give you a feel. It's not, it's not bad to, hey, do it in pixels, and once you get comfortable with that, try the fractional units, the FR way of doing it. And then once you're like, okay, I'm totally cool with that, then using these names is not bad. And so then how would you get, I got to 50. How would I get, no, I want the map to be really big. So I want the, the 2 rows full height, but 66% of the screen, kind of without saying 66% of the screen in that. So I have another one called names too. And that, ooh, don't need that space in there. Names too. And so let's go take a look at names too. You do it like this, map, right? And so map gets 1FR, so 2FR when you add them, and then chart, and the map gets is in the next row. So 1FR, 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 but there's 2 maps, so it's like 2FR in that. So it gives you an idea with words how much of the screen you're going to get. Map's going to get like 2 rows, 2 columns worth in that, and if they're evenly weighted in that. And so will this actually work? So let's go see who I commented out. Okay, I'm importing 2. Let's pop over to actually Firefox on this one. And so then we see map, chart, right? So in terms of like just visualizing what this grid's going to look like I said, flowers go to Firefox. And then when you click on an individual element, it'll highlight, okay, this is the area for the map, all right? And here, even though this is second in the file, down in the corner, right, this is the area for KPI, and this is the area for the chart in that. My mouse keeps going off. I got to keep my mouse right on that thing in that. And so, again, I think just make the grid, like I said, start with pixels. That's where I started. Then I moved to fractional units, which got me even closer. And then I tried this thing with the words, but I wasn't ready for the words until I had actually went through the process of, okay, pixels I got, height, some tricks there for figuring out the height of a row. And then I was, once I set that up, I was okay using the names to specify these templating names or templating areas in that. This is a little bit easier to visualize because, otherwise you get that strange / notation and strange calc signs and stuff like that. So these aren't bad ways to attack, I think, this grid, but it is just you playing around with the cascading style sheet, visualizing the grid in something like Firefox or Chrome. Chrome, they both do a good job, but in this case, with the names in the middle, right? So you're not colliding, and they do a good job of spacing these labels, so they're not on top of each other. And that's so for grid, for W3 Consortium grid visualization, this is the one. This is the tool to have in the quiver to check that out. Even if you don't use Firefox that much, definitely worth it to visualize this grid. So I'm going to wrap that up there, and hopefully this video helps. Take care.